Joining me on the program this morning, I have the Acting Shadow Treasurer, Andrew Robb, joins me from Melbourne. Mr Robb, thanks for your time. Before we get into areas of your responsibility specifically, I want to ask you about this hardening position from the Coalition. If the Coalition does take this stance, as Mr Abbott there predicts, it would preclude any possibility of Andrew Wilkie changing sides, wouldn't it?
Well, it's up to him what he decides to do. He has said quite emphatically that that if the government doesn't get this measure up in the form that he wanted, that he would change sides. But that's his call. We've got to deal with issues as they arise, and this is bad policy. It's just more than any state. We've seen mountains of that over the last 3 or 4 years, and you know, I think what Tony Abbott said yesterday is quite consistent with what I'm hearing in the party room. And the problem really is with all this, it's just a political stunt. The Prime Minister only ever agreed to it because it guaranteed Wilkie's vote and the opportunity to form government. And the problem really is that not only will it cost tens of millions of dollars for the clubs and the pubs and the RSLs, but it will not do anything about problem gambling.
What about the argument, though, that's being put, for example, Western Australia doesn't have poker machines in clubs, and pubs and sporting clubs and so on, and yet their sporting clubs look to be quite healthy, their civic services look to be quite healthy. Doesn't impact adversely on that state.
But, well, first and foremost, this is not a question about whether we have pokies or not. They are an established feature in so many pubs and clubs throughout eastern states. The problem is that, is this measure going to do anything constructively to reduce problem gambling? And if you look where it was applied in Norway, the only country in the world where they had mandatory pre-commitment, there was a massive movement of gambling to online gambling, and in fact the problem gambling got worse under this measure. Now that's the only case in the world where we've seen this thing trialled, and it failed. It failed abysmally, so it will mean tens of millions of dollars being spent purely to keep Julia Gillard in office. That's what that's really the nub of this issue. It is a token measure which is going to do nothing for problem gambling. It will significantly increase the nanny state. It will cost tens of millions of dollars, all for no good reason.
All right, let's move on. We can get bogged down in that debate, though. I mean, the Productivity Commission and others have put it forward. But let's look at the other issues of enormous importance at the moment. The Euro meeting in Brussels. This has so much significance, not just for Europe, but for the rest of the global economy, doesn't it? And there's not much optimism around the place that they're going to get their act together. Really, the concern here is about Italy, isn't it? It's not so much about Greece. It's about the third biggest economy, following Greece's lead here with this debt crisis.
Well, yes, I agree with that. It looks as though we've got not only Greece, but you've got Spain, you've got Portugal, of course Ireland's a cot case now, but Italy, which is one of the biggest economies in the world, it does seem to be carrying an extraordinary amount of debt. The bottom line is that Europe and the United States have been living beyond their means for a long time, and the inevitable adjustment seems to be coming. And I think we have to put the seatbelt on.
What about the prospect of China and Asia being a buffer this time around? China, 20% of its exports go to Europe, so obviously it's going to take a decent hit if this does all fall over, as many are predicting. Therefore, it's unlikely to be the buffer that it was for Australia. Again, this time around, if there is a double-dip global recession, would you agree with that?
Well, that's been our concern now for 12 months or more. It's the reason we've been arguing that the government, our government, should be also looking to live within its means. Yet this year alone, the one we're currently in, we look like, at best, this government spending $22 billion, $22 billion more than we will receive in taxation. Now, that's in the middle of a mining boom, and it just beggars belief at the profligacy that's gone on with this government and the failure to rein in their spending. That will be the third biggest budget deficit in our history. The previous two, of course, have been the last 2 years. So for the Prime Minister to be out there lecturing the Europeans on living within their means, it's embarrassing almost to see the sort of nonsense she's gone on with in the last few days. The message is true, but to come from her and a government that has been demonstrably spending far more than we've been raising, despite the mining boom, just undermines the whole strength of that case.
The Prime Minister on free trade at the Commonwealth Business Forum last night said that Australia will open access to imports from 50 of the poorest developing nations without tariffs, without quotas, designed to try and give the free trade agenda a bit of a kickstart. That sounds like a good idea, doesn't it?
Well, it's an excellent idea, in my view, but that's why it was introduced in 2003 by the Howard government. And this government, quite correctly and properly, has continued that. We already have access to the 50 poorest countries, and it's been in place now for some time, and it is something that most certainly should be followed through by other countries. But again, Kieran, we need to make sure that we follow through, that we do actually be consistent with interventions in the economy and protection. And you'd have to say the multi-billion-dollar subsidy and the monopoly, the telecom monopoly that's being created by this government, the NBN, that is precluding all sorts of possible access by other countries. It is a form of protection, and to create another government monopoly, we're the only country that I know in the world which is renationalising its telecommunications. So again, we need to be consistent if the Prime Minister is going to stand up there in an international forum with some credibility and lecture other countries.
Just quickly, one last question on the prospect of a rate cut on Melbourne Cup Day. You'd welcome that, wouldn't you?
We most assuredly would, and we've been saying for some time now that some of our economy really is in recession. There are parts of our economy, despite the fact that we've got this great blessing of a boom in the resources sector. We have got very much a two-speed economy, and there are many millions of households, in fact, who are suffering from mortgage stress, and there are many, many businesses, in fact hundreds of thousands, who are also doing it very tough. So any sort of cut on Wednesday would be most acceptable.
Andrew Robb, appreciate your time. Thanks for that.
Thanks very much, Kieran.